The cafe manager fired the homeless old man, not knowing he was the CEO in disguise. The air in the opulent conference room crackled with an uncomfortable silence, thick enough to be cut with a diamond-studded knife. Elias Thorne, his once formidable frame now appearing frail and shrunken, sat at the head of the polished mahogany table. The weight of years and the burden of a deeply held secret seemed to press upon his shoulders, yet beneath the weariness etched on his face, a nascent flicker of satisfaction stirred in the depths of his usually piercing blue eyes. Those eyes, once capable of dissecting complex balance sheets and seeing through the veneers of human souls, now held a detached, almost amused, quality. Across from him, Brenda Sterling, her perfectly coiffed blonde hair a testament to meticulous grooming, her designer suit broadcasting an air of unshakable confidence, offered a polite but patronizing smile. She had just finished her presentation on optimizing customer flow and profit margins in urban flagship locations, a torrent of corporate jargon that Elias had barely registered beyond the droning buzz it created in his ears. His mind was elsewhere, replaying scenes from the past week, each memory a quiet affirmation of his audacious plan. "So, Mr. Thorne," Brenda began, her voice smooth as silk, a hint of impatience betraying her polished facade. A subtle shift in her posture, a slight tilt of her head, conveyed a clear message of dismissal. "Are there any further questions regarding the Q3 projections? Or perhaps, you prefer to delegate the detailed analysis to our, more actively engaged executives?" She gestured subtly towards the other board members, a knowing smirk playing on her lips, a silent invitation for them to share in her condescension. They, in turn, shifted uncomfortably in their plush leather chairs, their gazes avoiding Elias's. They had long since written off the septuagenarian CEO as a relic, a figurehead whose once brilliant mind, they believed, was now clouded by age and sentimentality. They saw a man lost in the past, unable to comprehend the cutthroat realities of modern business, a man whose time had surely passed. Elias, however, merely leaned back in his plush leather chair, the soft leather creaking faintly under his weight. A slow, almost imperceptible smile formed on his lips, a private amusement playing across his features. His gaze swept across the faces of his most trusted, most pampered executives, the very individuals he had poured his life's work into grooming, individuals he had once believed understood the true spirit of his company. Each wore an expression ranging from mild annoyance to thinly veiled condescension, their eyes reflecting the contempt they held for what they perceived as his fading intellect. They saw an old man, a figurehead, not the cunning architect of a global empire. They saw a fading star, not the supernova about to erupt. A deep satisfaction settled in his chest, a quiet triumph for the revelations that were about to unfold. "Questions, Brenda?" Elias finally spoke, his voice, though soft, carried an unexpected resonance that cut through the room's tension like a well-honed blade. His words seemed to hang in the air, weighted with an unspoken meaning. Oh, he had many questions, indeed. Questions about integrity, about compassion, about the very soul of this company he built from the ground up. He paused, letting his words hang in the air, allowing the subtle shift in his tone to ripple through the room. Brenda's smile faltered, a flicker of confusion crossing her meticulously composed features, a tiny crack appearing in her perfect veneer. The other executives exchanged puzzled glances, a dawning unease settling over them. Was the old man finally losing it, or was there something far more sinister at play? But perhaps, Elias continued, his gaze locking onto Brenda, a chilling clarity in his eyes that made her momentarily shiver despite the warmth of the room. The most pressing question is this: do you remember the old man who came into your cafe last month? The one you so enthusiastically escorted out? Brenda's brow furrowed, a flicker of irritation replacing her confusion. Mr. Thorne, with all due respect, she managed one of his busiest flagship locations. She dealt with hundreds of customers daily. She could not be expected to recall every transient individual who might attempt to loiter on their premises. Her voice was dismissive, almost contemptuous, as if the mere mention of such a person was beneath her, a stain on the pristine image she cultivated for herself and her branch. A humorless chuckle escaped Elias's lips, a sound that held no mirth, only a deep, cold irony. Transient, she said. Loitering. Fascinating. Because that, transient individual, Brenda, was Elias Thorne. And that, loitering, was merely an attempt to observe the true heart of the daily grind. An attempt that, he had to say, yielded some truly enlightening results. The silence that followed was deafening, a vacuum in which no one dared to breathe. Brenda's face, a moment ago so self-assured, drained of all color, turning a ghostly white. Her eyes widened in disbelief, then horror, as the full implication of his words slammed into her. The other executives, who had been smugly observing the exchange, suddenly sat bolt upright, their own smugness replaced by dawning dread. A collective realization washed over them: the old man wasn't rambling. He wasn't losing it. He was, in fact, laying a trap, and they had just unwittingly sprung it. The game, as Elias had quietly declared to himself moments before, was indeed over. Elias Thorne had always been a visionary, a man who saw not just what was, but what could be. His youth had been marked by a fierce independence and an unyielding spirit, forged in the quiet resilience of a working-class neighborhood. He remembered the small, unassuming coffee shop on the corner, a place where people gathered, not just for caffeine, but for connection, for a brief respite from the world. It was a place where a single cup of coffee could warm not just the body, but the soul. This memory had sparked something profound within him. In his early 20s, armed with little more than a keen mind and an unshakable belief in the power of human connection, he had poured his meager savings and boundless energy into founding the Daily Grind, a tiny, unassuming coffee shop nestled in a quiet urban neighborhood. His initial vision was simple yet profound: to create a third space, a sanctuary where people could connect, where the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the warmth of genuine human interaction. He believed that a cup of coffee was more than just a beverage; it was an invitation to pause, to converse, to simply be, a simple act of hospitality that could bridge divides. For decades, the Daily Grind flourished under his meticulous care. He had personally overseen every detail, from sourcing the most ethically grown beans to designing the ergonomic chairs that invited lingering. He had spent countless hours training his baristas, not just in the art of coffee making, but in the art of human connection, instilling in them a culture of kindness and genuine service. He had insisted that every customer, regardless of their status or spending power, felt valued, a welcome guest in his establishment. It grew, slowly at first, expanding from a beloved local spot into a national sensation, and eventually, a vast global chain of upscale cafes. His success was legendary, not just for the billions he amassed, but for the company culture he had so carefully cultivated, a culture built on the bedrock of empathy and community. However, as the empire expanded, so too did the layers of bureaucracy, the insistent demands of shareholders, and the relentless, almost predatory, pursuit of profit. Elias found himself increasingly detached from the day-to-day operations, his time consumed by endless board meetings, quarterly reports, and strategic mergers that felt hollow. The vibrant, human-centric company he had built began to feel cold. Corporate. He saw it in the data-driven decisions that prioritized efficiency over empathy, in the executive meetings where discussions revolved solely around market share and customer demographics, rarely about the actual human experience, the quiet moments of connection. He heard it in the increasingly sterile language of his own executives, who spoke of customer segments and brand optics rather than community and connection, their words devoid of warmth. A growing disillusionment gnawed at him, a persistent ache in his chest. He saw the company, his life's work, slowly but surely transforming into something he barely recognized, a cold, efficient machine. His executives, once passionate individuals who shared his vision, had become polished, ruthless operators, more concerned with their bonuses and career trajectories than with the foundational values of the daily grind. They were pampered, insulated by their wealth and status, seemingly incapable of understanding the struggles of the average person, let alone the truly marginalized. He felt a profound disconnect, a chasm widening between his original dream and the harsh corporate reality. The very essence of what he had built was eroding, like a beloved statue slowly crumbling into dust. One particular incident had served as a bitter turning point, a moment of stark, painful clarity. During a routine review of customer feedback, a task he often undertook personally, Elias stumbled upon a recurring theme: complaints about the declining warmth of service, the hurried nature of transactions, the subtle but pervasive feeling that customers were now just numbers, statistics on a spreadsheet. He cross-referenced this with internal reports showing increased staff turnover, particularly among the lower-paid baristas, many citing a lack of human touch and unrealistic demands from management. Simultaneously, he noted glowing performance reviews for managers like Brenda Sterling, whose metrics for efficiency and revenue growth were stellar, but whose customer satisfaction scores, when truly analyzed, told a different story. One of superficial pleasantries masking underlying indifference, a hollow smile over a cold heart. He remembered one specific comment, scrawled angrily on a feedback card: "Your coffee is still good, but your soul has gone cold." That phrase haunted him. The final straw came during a particularly sterile board meeting, a grim tableau of ambition and apathy. One of his vice presidents, a man he had mentored for decades, a man whose potential he had once believed in deeply, casually dismissed a proposal for a new community outreach program, citing unacceptable ROI and potential brand dilution if the company associated too closely with less affluent demographics. Elias had looked at the faces around the table, seeing only nodding agreement, not a single flicker of objection, not a shred of human empathy. It was then that a chilling realization solidified within him: the rot had gone deep. His company, once a beacon of warmth, was becoming a monument to cold, hard capitalism. His executives, insulated in their ivory towers, had lost touch with the very humanity they were supposed to serve. They had forgotten the coffee, forgotten the grind, forgotten the people. They had forgotten the heart. A profound sadness settled over him, mingling with a burning resolve. Elias knew he couldn't simply fire them all based on a feeling, on a growing sense of dread. He needed proof. He needed undeniable evidence of the erosion of his company's soul, irrefutable testimony of their moral decay. He needed to see it, firsthand, unvarnished by corporate reports or polished presentations. He needed to become invisible, to strip away the billionaire facade and observe the true nature of his operations from the ground up. He needed to become the very person his executives had so easily dismissed, a forgotten face in a bustling crowd. The idea, audacious and perhaps a little mad, began to form in his mind, sparked by that angry customer feedback and the callous dismissal of his VP. He would go undercover. Not as a secret shopper or a mystery executive, but as someone utterly insignificant, someone routinely overlooked and often dismissed, an elderly, seemingly homeless man. This disguise would be the ultimate test, a crucible for the company's true character. It would expose the true character of his managers and employees, revealing who possessed genuine compassion beneath the veneer of corporate professionalism, and who was merely a hollow shell of ambition and avarice. It was a test he knew he had to administer, no matter the personal cost. Preparing for the role was meticulous, a fascinating and strangely humbling experience. Elias, a man accustomed to bespoke suits and luxury cars, spent weeks studying the mannerisms, the subtle postures, the weary gait of those who lived on the streets. He visited libraries in poorer districts, observing without drawing attention, learning the quiet dignity and the crushing weight of their daily existence. He consulted with a discreet theatrical makeup artist, a woman sworn to secrecy and a master of her craft, who helped him craft a believable transformation: thinning, unkempt gray hair, a scraggly beard that added years to his face, subtle age spots, and a sallow complexion that spoke of hardship and neglect. He acquired worn, ill-fitting clothes from charity shops, deliberately choosing items that appeared stained and frayed, items that would render him invisible to the privileged eye. He even practiced hunching his shoulders, allowing his usual confident stride to become a shuffling, hesitant walk, his eyes downcast. He withdrew a significant sum of cash, ensuring he could buy a cup of coffee without needing a credit card or digital payment, thus avoiding any digital footprint that could expose him. He wanted to be completely off the grid, a ghost in his own machine. His plan was simple in its execution, profound in its implications. He would visit various daily grind locations, particularly the flagship stores managed by his rising stars, the ones with the most impressive profit margins and the most gleaming facades. He would sit, observe, and, most importantly, be seen as an unwanted presence. He wanted to see how his managers, steeped in the corporate culture he had inadvertently allowed to flourish, would react. Would they uphold the original values of kindness and inclusivity, or would they prioritize image and profit above all else? And just as crucially, he wanted to see if there were still individuals, true to the spirit of the daily grinds, humble beginnings, who understood that a cup of coffee could be a gesture of humanity, not just a transaction. He was searching for a glimmer of light in what he feared had become a spreading darkness within his own empire. Elias Thorne's transformation was startling, even to himself. Looking in the mirror, he no longer saw the billionaire CEO, but a reflection of countless forgotten souls he had perhaps, in his own insulated world, overlooked. The weight of his former identity seemed to lift, replaced by the crushing anonymity of his new persona. His tailored suits were replaced by a threadbare, oversized coat that reeked faintly of mothballs and stale air, a scent that clung to him like a second skin. His meticulously groomed silver hair was now a tangled mess, a few strands escaping from beneath a worn wool cap that barely offered warmth. A week's growth of an unkempt beard obscured his jawline, and his eyes, usually sharp and commanding, were now artfully dulled, reflecting a profound weariness he genuinely felt from the discomfort of his disguise. His designer shoes had given way to scuffed, worn-out sneakers that offered little comfort or warmth against the biting city pavements. Each step was a physical reminder of the lives he was now experiencing, lives he had previously only seen from a distance. His first few attempts at observation were in smaller, less prominent, daily grind locations, testing the waters, refining his act. The reactions varied, though none were overtly hostile. Some baristas subtly ignored him, their eyes skimming over him as if he were part of the furniture, too busy with their phones or their chatter. Others offered quick, perfunctory service, their movements telegraphing a desire to get him out of the queue as quickly as possible. Managers would eye him warily from a distance, perhaps giving a polite but firm instruction to security or a junior staff member to keep an eye on him, or subtly increasing the volume of the in-store music to drown out any lingering presence. It was polite dismissal, a quiet ushering away, a calculated act of maintaining a perceived image. It was disappointing, a confirmation of the creeping indifference, but not yet the stark, irrefutable evidence he sought. He needed a harsher proving ground. He then set his sights on the crown jewel of his empire, the flagship cafe managed by Brenda Sterling. This particular location was a gleaming testament to modern corporate design, sleek, minimalist, with polished concrete floors that echoed with every step, and strategically placed artisanal pastries under glass domes that seemed almost too perfect to touch. It was a cathedral to commercialism, humming with the low thrum of expensive espresso machines and the polite, hushed chatter of the city's elite. Elias had personally approved its design years ago, envisioning it as a beacon of his brand, a symbol of upscale hospitality. Now, as he approached it in his disguise, it felt alien, intimidating, a fortress of prosperity that seemed to actively repel those outside its gilded walls. He chose a particularly cold Tuesday morning for his visit, the kind of day that bit at exposed skin and made one crave warmth. The wind whipped through the city streets, carrying with it the grit and noise of urban life. He clutched a tattered newspaper, a prop to convey an illusion of purpose, a shield against direct engagement. As he pushed open the heavy glass door, a chime announced his arrival, a bright, welcoming sound that felt utterly incongruous with his current appearance. The warmth inside was immediate, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside, and for a moment, Elias allowed himself to simply bask in it, the chill slowly receding from his bones. The rich aroma of freshly ground coffee beans filled the air, a scent that had once been synonymous with comfort and welcome, a scent that had defined his life's work, but now felt strangely distant, almost mocking in its inaccessible luxury. He shuffled towards an empty table in a corner, out of the main thoroughfare but still visible, a strategic position for observation. His plan was simple: order a single, cheap coffee, and nurse it for as long as possible, observing the interactions, the nuances of the environment. He approached the counter hesitantly, his eyes darting around the bustling café, feigning an awkward discomfort. A young man, barely out of his teens, with bright, earnest eyes and a slightly rumpled apron, stood behind the espresso machine, his movements quick and efficient, yet somehow unhurried. This was Finn O'Malley, a barista Elias would soon learn much about, a name that would come to symbolize hope. "Just a regular coffee, please," Elias mumbled, his voice deliberately hoarse, his gaze fixed on the price list, trying to appear hesitant about the cost, as if every penny counted. Finn's eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment, Elias thought he saw a flicker of something akin to understanding, perhaps even sympathy, in the young man's gaze, a quiet recognition of his perceived plight. "Coming right up, sir," Finn replied, his voice unexpectedly gentle, without the hurried brusqueness Elias had come to expect from the relentless demands of a high-volume café. He poured the coffee into a standard paper cup, not a ceramic mug, which Elias noted was common practice for take-out orders and, he suspected, less desirable customers. As Finn handed him the cup, their fingers brushed briefly. "Stay warm," Finn added quietly, a small, genuine smile gracing his lips, a warmth radiating from his eyes. It was a simple phrase, a fleeting gesture, but in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, it was a balm, a tiny spark of unexpected humanity. Elias nodded, a lump forming in his throat, a surprising wave of emotion washing over him. He paid with crumpled bills, avoiding Finn's gaze, and shuffled away to his chosen corner table, the warmth of the cheap coffee a surprising comfort in his hands. From his vantage point, he began to observe. He watched Brenda Sterling, the manager, move through the café like a predator, her sleek form cutting through the throngs of customers. Her movements were sharp, decisive, her posture radiating an air of polished control. Her eyes, constantly scanning, didn't seem to linger on faces, but rather on details: a misplaced chair, a smudged table, a customer lingering too long with an empty cup. She was a master of efficiency, her presence radiating an aura of unwavering control, every gesture calculated for maximum impact. She embodied the corporate ideal of his new executives, cold and precise. It wasn't long before Brenda spotted Elias. Her gaze, sharp and critical, swept over him, lingering for a fraction of a second on his disheveled appearance, a flicker of distaste crossing her features. A subtle frown creased her brow, a sign of her displeasure at the disruption to her carefully curated ambience. Elias watched her subtly adjust her posture, straighten her already pristine blazer, and then, with a determined set to her jaw, she began to walk towards him, her heels clicking crisply on the polished floor. He knew this moment was coming. This was the true test, the moment of truth. "Excuse Elias, sir," Brenda's voice was perfectly modulated, polite yet firm, like a velvet-covered iron fist, each word carefully chosen to convey authority without overt aggression. Her smile, though professional, did not reach her eyes, a cold, calculating glint replacing any warmth. "Are you enjoying your coffee?" Elias looked up, feigning a slight startle, his eyes wide and a touch uncertain. "Oh, yes. Thank you. It's very warm." He clutched the cup a little tighter, playing the part of the vulnerable old man. "Wonderful," she replied, her smile tightening, a barely perceptible tremor in her voice betraying a hint of impatience. "However, it appears you've been with us for quite some time. We have a rather exclusive clientele, you see, and we like to maintain a certain ambience." Our tables are generally reserved for paying customers making active purchases. Her words dripped with condescension, a thinly veiled accusation. Elias knew this was a lie, a transparent attempt to justify his removal. He had just bought a coffee. The cafe was busy, but there were still empty tables, their polished surfaces reflecting the soft glow of the overhead lights. He knew her true meaning, her disdain for anyone who didn't fit her image of a daily grind customer. I just needed to warm up, he mumbled, attempting to look small and vulnerable, his voice barely audible. Brenda's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation in their depths. Elias understood, sir. But this is a business establishment, not a public shelter. We have a policy. He was afraid he would have to ask him to finish his beverage quickly and vacate the premises. Or she would have to call security. The threat was clear, delivered with a chillingly polite tone, a veneer of professionalism barely concealing her contempt. Her gaze darted to Finn, who was now watching the scene from behind the counter, his expression a mix of concern and helplessness, a silent plea in his eyes. Elias saw it all, every subtle nuance. Elias felt a pang of anger, a surge of righteous indignation, but he suppressed it, allowing it to fuel his resolve. This was precisely what he had come to see. The ruthless, image-obsessed ambition that had taken root in his company, stifling the very soul he had poured into it. He rose slowly, his movements deliberately slow and hesitant, emphasizing his perceived frailty. He looked at Brenda, his eyes holding a depth she couldn't possibly comprehend, a history she was blind to. Elias understood, he said, his voice barely a whisper, imbued with a quiet dignity she likely missed. He turned to leave, the half-empty cup still warm in his hand, a symbol of the discarded kindness. As he reached the exit, his hand on the cold metal bar, he heard Finn's voice, a little louder than a whisper, but still discreet, almost conspiratorial. Sir. Wait. Elias paused, turning back slightly, his heart strangely warmed. Finn was holding out a small paper bag, a warm pastry peeking out from within, its flaky crust still glistening, and another paper cup, steaming gently. Here, Finn said, his voice earnest, his eyes meeting Elias's with an open, genuine warmth. This one's on me. And, this is a fresh one. His compliments. He offered a genuine, compassionate smile, a beacon of light in the cold corporate space. It's cold out there. Stay safe. Elias looked from the young barista to the pastry, then back at Finn's kind face. In that moment, the sterile, corporate facade of the cafe seemed to melt away, revealing a single, shining beacon of humanity. It was a stark contrast to Brenda's cold dismissal, a small act of defiance against the corporate machine, a quiet act of rebellion against the dehumanization. Elias nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the kindness, the unexpected grace, and took the bag and cup, his fingers brushing Finn's again. Thank him, he managed, his voice thick with emotion he hadn't anticipated. He didn't look at Brenda, who was now glaring at Finn from across the room, a silent warning in her eyes, a clear indication of her displeasure at this subversive act of compassion. Elias shuffled out into the cold, the pastry a surprising comfort, a profound sense of purpose solidifying within him. The test was truly underway. His observations didn't end there. Over the next few days, Elias made several more discreet visits to Brenda's cafe, always in his disguise, always pushing the boundaries of her tolerance. Each time, Brenda's disdain for him grew more palpable, her patience wearing thin. On one occasion, he attempted to use the restroom, feigning a sudden need, only to be intercepted by Brenda who, without a word, pointed to a "Customers Only" sign prominently displayed on the door and then back to the main entrance. Her eyes conveyed a clear message: he was not welcome, not even to use the facilities, a basic human right. Her efficiency in keeping the undesirables out was a point of pride for her, something he knew she would later highlight in her performance reviews, a testament to her dedication to the brand image. Another time, he overheard her instruct a security guard to keep an eye on the old vagrant in the corner, and to discourage loitering, her voice low but firm. Elias felt the sting of her words, but also a grim satisfaction. She was providing him with all the evidence he needed. Meanwhile, Finn, though cautious under Brenda's watchful eye, found subtle ways to extend small kindnesses, like a secret rebellion. He would sometimes leave a half-eaten sandwich or a slightly damaged pastry on a table he knew Elias would pass, feigning forgetfulness, glancing briefly at Elias with a quick, reassuring nod. Once, he even managed to slip Elias a half-empty travel mug of hot water, claiming it was a mistake from a previous order, a way to offer warmth without drawing Brenda's ire. Each gesture, though small, was a lifeline of human connection, a testament to a spirit that had not been crushed by the relentless demands of a profit-driven corporation. Elias observed Finn's interactions with other customers too, his genuine interest in their day, his patience with the elderly who sometimes struggled with their orders, his quick wit and gentle humor with children. He saw a young man who truly embodied the original spirit of the daily grind, a rare gem in a hardening landscape. Elias also noted Brenda's interactions with her staff. Her tone was often sharp, her criticisms cutting, delivered with an icy professionalism that chilled the atmosphere. She pushed them relentlessly to upsell, to maximize every transaction, to rush customers through their orders, demanding ever higher throughput. He overheard her reprimanding a junior barista for spending too much time talking to an elderly customer about their day, instructing them to focus on throughput, not life stories, a phrase that resonated with Elias's own fears. He saw the weary resignation in the eyes of the staff, the forced smiles, the underlying tension that permeated the meticulously clean establishment. It was clear that Brenda's ambition, her singular focus on metrics, had created an atmosphere of fear, not collaboration, a workplace where empathy was a liability. Through it all, Elias, the unassuming vagrant, sat and watched. He saw the company he built, a company meant to foster connection, actively push people away in the name of profit and image. He saw the very values he had instilled being systematically dismantled by those who sought to climb the corporate ladder, by those who saw people only as numbers. And he saw a young man, a beacon of what was good and true, struggling to maintain his humanity in an increasingly dehumanizing environment, a quiet hero in a world of self-serving ambition. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable, and his resolve hardened with each passing moment. The test was complete. The time for the mask to fall was rapidly approaching, and with it, a reckoning. The day of the quarterly executive review was always a meticulously planned affair at the Daily Grind headquarters, a grand display of corporate power and self-congratulation. This particular review was especially significant, as it involved the final approval of the next fiscal year's budget and the strategic direction for global expansion, promises of even greater profit to come. Brenda Sterling, due to her stellar performance metrics and her cafe's impressively inflated profit margins, had been invited to present her operational model as a case study for future development, a shining example of efficiency. She stood before the assembled board members, including a seemingly detached Elias Thorne, who occupied his usual seat at the head of the table, radiating confidence, her smile unwavering. She spoke of efficiency, of customer segmentation, of maximizing revenue per square foot, her words entirely devoid of any mention of human connection or community, painting a picture of a soulless but profitable future. Just as Brenda was wrapping up her presentation, concluding with a flourish of financial projections, a subtle commotion began at the back of the conference room. A ripple of whispers, a few heads turning. The heavy oak doors, usually kept shut and guarded during such high-level meetings, slowly, dramatically, creaked open, revealing a sliver of the polished marble hallway beyond. All heads turned, curiosity quickly turning to shock. Standing in the doorway, framed by the opulent architecture, was not the disheveled, hunched figure they had seen days earlier, the frail, aging CEO they had grown accustomed to dismissing. Instead, a man stood tall and commanding, his silver hair immaculately coiffed, his bespoke suit exuding an undeniable aura of power and wealth that seemed to fill the room. His eyes, no longer dulled by pretense, gleamed with an intelligence that pierced through the room, sweeping over each executive with a gaze that held both judgment and an unspoken promise of consequence. Beside him stood his longtime legal counsel, Mr. Alastair Finch, a formidable figure in his own right, known for his unyielding precision and unwavering loyalty to Elias, his stern face confirming the gravity of the moment. It was Elias Thorne, but not the Elias Thorne they thought they knew. This was Elias Thorne, the Titan, the visionary, the man who had built an empire from nothing, resurrected from the ashes of their contempt. A collective gasp rippled through the room, a wave of stunned silence following in its wake. Brenda Sterling, mid-sentence, her voice faltered, her jaw dropping almost imperceptibly, her perfectly composed features dissolving into confusion. Her eyes, wide with shock, darted frantically between the imposing figure in the doorway and the seemingly frail man who had been sitting silently at the head of the table. The realization, cold and stark, hit her with the force of a physical blow, stealing her breath. The old man at the table, a decoy, a distraction. The man in the doorway, the true power, the vengeful architect of her downfall. He apologized for the interruption, Miss Sterling. Elias Thorne's voice boomed, deep and resonant, filling the room with an authority that had been conspicuously absent in recent months, an authority that commanded instant attention. He walked slowly, deliberately, towards the head of the table, his gaze sweeping over the pale, terrified faces of his executives, each one now squirming in their expensive seats, their carefully constructed facades crumbling around them. Brenda, her face now completely devoid of color, stammered, "And Mr. Thorne." "But, he was." Elias meant, "What is the meaning of this?" Her eyes darted wildly, desperately trying to reconcile the two impossible images of the man, her mind struggling to make sense of the betrayal. Elias finally stood beside the chair at the head of the table, not sitting, but standing over them, an imposing presence. He leaned slightly, his gaze fixed on Brenda, a chillingly calm expression on his face, devoid of anger, only steely resolve. "The meaning, Miss Sterling," he began, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl that sent shivers down their spines, "is that the game is over. The charade is finished. And the truth," Elias assured her, "is far more revealing than any of her meticulously crafted profit projections." He then gestured towards Mr. Finch, who stepped forward, holding a thick legal folder, its contents a silent threat. "Mr. Finch has prepared some immediate changes to the organizational structure. Changes prompted by recent, Elias would say, field observations that have illuminated certain deficiencies in their corporate culture." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken consequences. The executives shifted nervously, their discomfort palpable. They sensed the guillotine blade descending, felt the cold steel against their necks. "Brenda Sterling," Elias continued, his voice ringing with cold authority, each word a hammer blow, her performance metrics were indeed impressive on paper. She had demonstrated an admirable dedication to profit. However, she had also demonstrated a profound disregard for the fundamental values upon which the daily grind was built: compassion, human connection, and genuine service. Her treatment of what she perceived to be a loitering transient last week was not only abhorrent but a direct violation of the very ethos of this company. That transient, Miss Sterling, was Elias Thorne. And her actions, along with those of several others in this room, have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that the heart of this company has been allowed to calcify, to turn to stone. Brenda staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth, a strangled cry escaping her lips, a sound of utter defeat. Her perfectly constructed world crumbled around her, exposed as a hollow edifice built on lies. The sheer, audacious audacity of his plan, the profound humiliation of having been so thoroughly deceived by the very man she had scorned, was almost too much to bear. The CEO, the old man she had so casually dismissed and threatened, was the very vagrant she had scorned. The irony was a bitter, burning acid in her throat, scalding her with its truth. Elias turned his gaze to the other executives, his voice gaining momentum, hardening with each word. Each of them, in their own way, had contributed to this decline. They had prioritized numbers over people, image over integrity. They had allowed avarice to replace empathy, turning a blind eye to the very soul of the company. But that, Elias assured them, ends today. The era of complacent, profit-driven indifference was over. The atmosphere in the room was electric with shock and fear, a palpable wave of dread. The masks had fallen. The true nature of their leader, and their own failures, had been brutally exposed. The revelation sent shockwaves not only through the conference room but through the entire corporate structure of the daily grind, reverberating from the highest echelons to the lowest barista. The immediate aftermath was swift and brutal for those who had failed Elias's test, a stark display of justice. Brenda Sterling was the first to face the consequences, her fall as spectacular as her previous ascent. Her face, a mask of disbelief and horror, crumbled as Elias's words echoed in her ears, each syllable a nail in her coffin. She tried to stammer out an apology, a desperate plea for understanding or mercy, but Elias simply raised a hand, silencing her with an unyielding gesture. Mr. Finch stepped forward, presenting a termination letter with a severance package that was minimal, barely enough to cover a few months' expenses, a final insult to her years of ruthless dedication. Her years of climbing the corporate ladder, her meticulous planning, her ruthless efficiency, all had been for naught, a house of cards collapsing in an instant. She was escorted out of the building by security, her designer handbag clutched tightly, her perfectly coiffed hair now appearing disheveled and her once confident stride reduced to a humiliated shuffle. The irony was poetic. The woman who prided herself on maintaining the perfect ambience and clientele was now herself a disruptive, unwanted presence, summarily dismissed from the very empire she had sought to control. Her grand plans for a promotion, for a regional directorship, evaporated like smoke, leaving only the bitter taste of ruin. Her carefully cultivated reputation was irrevocably tarnished, her name now synonymous with corporate ruthlessness and a spectacular fall from grace. Her phone, once buzzing with calls from recruiters and industry peers, went silent. Her carefully curated social circle, based largely on professional networking, evaporated, leaving her isolated and utterly alone, a pariah in the world she had so desperately sought to conquer. Several other executives who had consistently prioritized profit over people, or who had shown a similar lack of empathy in their own operations, also received their walking papers that day. The boardroom, once a den of comfortable self-interest, was now a place of cold, hard justice, a chilling reminder of the consequences of straying from the company's core values. Elias oversaw a complete restructuring of the upper management, bringing in new blood, individuals with proven track records of both competence and compassion, and, crucially, re-educating existing staff on the company's foundational values, initiating a cultural revolution. Meanwhile, a world away from the sterile corporate offices, Finn O'Malley was going about his daily routine at the flagship cafe, oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring above him. He had heard whispers, fragmented rumors filtering down from the corporate offices, something about a major shakeup, a sudden change in management, a high-level executive being escorted out. He had seen Brenda Sterling's strained face as she left the cafe earlier that morning, looking as though she had seen a ghost, her usual composure utterly shattered. But he was too preoccupied with his own struggles to dwell on corporate politics. His rent was due, his old car was making a strange, ominous noise, and his younger sister, whom he largely supported, needed new school supplies, a constant drain on his meager barista salary. Kindness, he knew, often came at a cost, sometimes earning him a sharp glare from Brenda, but he had never regretted his small acts of humanity, a quiet defiance against the prevailing cynicism. That afternoon, as the cafe was winding down, the last of the lunch rush fading, a sleek, black limousine, its windows darkly tinted, pulled up to the curb outside, drawing curious glances from passers-by. Finn watched, intrigued, as Mr. Alastair Finch, Elias Thorne's stern-faced legal counsel, stepped out, his imposing presence immediately noticeable. He then held the door open for Elias himself, no longer in disguise, but radiating an almost regal composure, his posture straight, his eyes gleaming with purpose. Elias's eyes, as they swept the interior of the café, held a newfound warmth, a profound sense of peace. Finn, recognizing Elias as the former vagrant, though he couldn't quite place the lawyer, whose face was vaguely familiar from corporate memos, felt a jolt of alarm, a sudden knot in his stomach. Had he done something wrong? Was this about the coffee and pastry he had offered, a breach of policy Brenda might have reported before her departure? Elias walked directly to the counter where Finn was wiping down the espresso machine, his movements fluid and purposeful. "Finn O'Malley," Elias said, his voice gentle, yet firm, a warmth in its tone that Finn found disarming. Finn straightened, a nervous tremor in his hands, his heart pounding in his chest. "Yes, sir," he managed, bracing himself for a reprimand. Elias smiled, a genuine, heartwarming smile that Finn had never seen before on the face of the old man. "Do you remember the old man you gave a coffee and a pastry to, last week?" Finn's eyes widened in realization, then confusion, as the pieces began to click into place, forming an unbelievable picture. "Yes, sir." He hoped that wasn't a problem, sir. His voice was barely a whisper. Elias chuckled softly, a deep, rumbling sound of genuine amusement. "Quite the opposite, Finn. That old man was Elias. Elias Thorne, founder and CEO of The Daily Grind. Finn's jaw dropped. His mind struggled to process the information, each word a shockwave. The CEO. The homeless man. The sheer absurdity of it was overwhelming, almost too fantastic to be real. He looked from Elias to Mr. Finch, then back to Elias, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and awe, a dawning comprehension of the grand, elaborate test. He was. Elias didn't understand, sir. He was conducting a test, Finn, Elias explained, his voice softening further, a quiet reverence in his tone. A test of character. A search for the true heart of this company, a heart he feared had been lost. And Finn, young man, he passed with flying colors. He showed kindness when others showed cruelty. He offered compassion when others offered contempt. He embodied the very spirit Elias founded The Daily Grind upon, the spirit that made it truly special. Mr. Finch stepped forward, holding a legal document, its crisp paper rustling softly. "Finn O'Malley," he began, his voice formal, yet with a hint of warmth that was rare for the stoic lawyer. "On behalf of Mr. Thorne, and in recognition of his exceptional display of integrity and empathy, he was hereby offered the position of Regional Operations Manager for The Daily Grind, overseeing a portfolio of 10 flagship cafes, including this very one. His salary would be commensurate with this executive position, effective immediately." Furthermore, Mr. Finch paused, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips, a sign of his own approval. "Mr. Thorne has personally authorized the full payment of the mortgage on his family home, ensuring his sister's education is fully funded through university, and a significant, untaxed bonus that should alleviate any immediate financial concerns he may have." This was not a bonus for work, but for character. Finn stood frozen, utterly stunned. He felt as though he had been hit by a tidal wave of pure, unimaginable good fortune, a torrent of blessings. His family home, secured. His sister's future, guaranteed. A promotion to a position he could only have dreamed of, a position that seemed light years away just moments ago. Tears welled in his eyes, blurring the edges of the gleaming café, making the polished surfaces shimmer. He thought of Brenda, of her coldness, of her dismissal. He thought of his own struggles, his quiet acts of kindness, often unnoticed, sometimes scorned. It wasn't a problem, she had said. It was everything. "Sir." "Elias," he didn't know what to say, Finn stammered, his voice choked with emotion, his carefully maintained composure finally breaking. Elias placed a reassuring hand on Finn's shoulder, a gesture of profound respect. "Say nothing, Finn. Just continue to be the kind, compassionate person he was. That was all Elias asked. Finn, overwhelmed, could only nod, tears streaming down his face, his vision blurred by gratitude. The contrast between Brenda's devastating fall and his own dizzying ascent was a stark, almost unbelievable testament to the power of pure human goodness, a cosmic balancing of the scales. Months later, the transformation within The Daily Grind was palpable, a quiet revolution sweeping through the company. Under Elias Thorne's renewed, hands-on leadership, and with Finn O'Malley at the forefront of the new regional management, the company began to rediscover its soul, a vibrant, beating heart once more. The sterile, profit-driven culture that had taken root was systematically dismantled, replaced by a renewed focus on empathy and community. Employee training programs were overhauled, focusing not just on efficiency but on genuine customer engagement, on fostering a sense of belonging, on treating every person who walked through their doors as a valued individual. The metrics of success were redefined to include not only revenue, but also customer satisfaction, employee well-being, and robust community involvement, a holistic approach to prosperity. Elias personally initiated several outreach programs, partnering with local charities, establishing community hours, where the cafes offered free coffee and space for local groups, and even establishing a foundation to support youth education in underserved neighborhoods. Elias Thorne, no longer a detached figurehead, found a renewed purpose in his work, a deep satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. He would often visit cafes, sometimes still in a subtle disguise, observing from the periphery, but more often simply as himself, engaging with customers and employees, listening, learning, and ensuring that the warmth he had originally envisioned was truly being felt, that his dream was alive again. He carried with him a profound sense of peace, knowing that he had corrected the course of his life's work, steering it back towards its true north, away from the icy grip of corporate greed. The bitter taste of disillusionment had been replaced by the sweet satisfaction of restoring integrity. He saw the genuine smiles of his employees, the relaxed laughter of customers, the quiet hum of connection, and knew that the heart of The Daily Grind was beating strongly once more. Finn O'Malley flourished in his new role, growing into the executive position with remarkable grace. He approached his responsibilities with the same earnest kindness he had shown as a barista, proving that empathy was not a weakness but a powerful strength. He fostered an environment where compassion was encouraged, where staff felt valued and empowered, and where customers were treated as individuals, not just transactions. His cafes consistently outperformed others not just in revenue, but in customer loyalty and employee morale, a testament to his human-centric approach. He built genuine relationships with his teams, remembering their names, listening to their concerns, and empowering them to embody the very kindness that had changed his own life. His sister thrived in her new school, secure in the knowledge that her future was bright, free from the financial worries that had once overshadowed their lives. Finn, once a struggling barista, had become a testament to the idea that true success lay not in ruthless ambition, but in unwavering compassion. Brenda Sterling, on the other hand, faded into obscurity, her carefully constructed world collapsing completely. Her attempts to find similar positions in other high-end establishments were met with polite but firm rejections, her impeccable resume now tainted. Her reputation preceded her, an indelible stain on her otherwise impressive career. She was a cautionary tale, whispered about in corporate circles, a vivid example of what happens when ambition eclipses ethics, when the pursuit of profit blinds one to humanity. She had learned a harsh lesson, stripped of her status and her perceived power, left only with the bitter taste of her own past callousness, a solitary figure haunted by her choices. The world often praises the shrewd, the cunning, the ruthlessly efficient. It celebrates those who climb to the top, regardless of who they step on along the way, glorifying a cold, calculating drive for success. But as the story of Elias Thorne and The Daily Grind vividly illustrates, true character is not forged in the bright glare of success, but revealed in the subtle shadows of adversity. It is in the quiet moments of compassion, in the unseen acts of kindness, in the willingness to offer warmth when faced with coldness, that the true measure of a person is taken. For in a world often blinded by superficial appearances and driven by fleeting gains, it is only in the darkness that the purest lights truly shine, proving that genuine goodness, quietly offered and truly felt, will always, without fail, find its way back to reward the hand that gives it, illuminating the path for others to follow. If this story of truth, kindness, and unexpected revelations resonated with you, imagine the other powerful narratives waiting to be discovered. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you more compelling tales that expose the true nature of humanity, where the tables turn on the arrogant and kindness finds its just reward. Don't miss out on another incredible story of justice and redemption. Make sure to subscribe to our channel right now and hit that notification bell so you're always the first to know when a new video drops. Now, we want to hear from you. What was the most shocking part of Elias Thorne's elaborate plan? Did you anticipate the true identity of the old man? And have you ever witnessed a moment in your own life where kindness truly paid off, or where someone's true character was unexpectedly revealed in a surprising way? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights make our community stronger.